Last week, we saw Nico Collins, Puka Nacua, Anthony Richardson, Kyron Williams, and DJ Moore go off in fantasy football, and they helped people win their fantasy matchups. This week, in week 5, I am bringing you 10 players that will absolutely dominate and help you win your matchups. So if you're facing these guys, I'm sorry. And if you have them in your lineups, get ready for a good week. The first player we're going to talk about that I think is going to dominate is Breece Hall at the Denver Broncos. If you drafted Breece Hall, or hopefully you just traded for him, you didn't have to draft him, you've been waiting patiently, or you just got him, you can go ahead and fire him up in your lineups. In 2023, the Broncos give up the most points to fantasy running backs. There is not a better matchup for running backs right now than the Denver Broncos. And Breece Hall season is approaching. In fact, it's wheels up in week 5. Before the year, on this very channel, we discussed in depth that we should lower our expectations for Breece to begin the year because he was recovering from that ACL injury. We have so many examples of running backs slowly finding their form, coming back from an ACL, getting worked into the game, being on snap counts. In weeks 1 to 4 of this year, Breece Hall averaged 39.5% of the snap share and 10.5 touches per game. That is not the Breece Hall that we know. Remember, in 2022, when he took this job in week 3, he was dominant. From weeks 3 to 6, before the ACL tear in 2022, he averaged 63% of the snaps and 21 touches per game. The offense was built around Breece Hall. Yeah, Garrett Wilson won Offensive Rookie of the Year, but Breece Hall was on track to do that, and he was averaging 19.7 PPR points per game in that time span before the ACL injury. Robert Saleh confirmed recently that they will not limit Breece Hall going forward. He officially is full go this week. Meanwhile, it's my strong belief that Dalvin Cook is kind of going to fade into oblivion. It's clear that he's not the same player he once was, even with the Jets' offensive line and offense in general not being good. If you look in 2023, Dalvin Cook is 88th in yards per carry. Okay, this is all according to fantasy points data. His explosive run rate, which these are the percentage of his rushing attempts that went for more than 15 yards, 0%, 79th. He hasn't had a single rushing attempt over 15 yards this year. His missed tackles forced per attempt, he's 75th in the NFL. And yards after contact per attempt, he is 74th. In no area where we can determine, efficiency or explosiveness is he succeeding, okay? Breece, with no snap limitations in the best possible matchups for a running back, expect him to explode with an offense that is looking better with a more competent Zach Wilson. All right, my second player that's going to dominate in week 5 is Zay Flowers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. In 2023, the Steelers give up the 3rd most points to fantasy wide receivers on a per-game basis. Zay has been up and down so far in 2023. In week 1, it looked really good. Through 4 weeks, though, he's averaging 6 receptions, 7.3 targets per game, 61 receiving yards, and 12.4 points per game. That is, in the Lamar Jackson era, unheard of for a wide receiver to average 7.3 targets per game. Think about it. It's typically been Mark Andrews or bust in this offense, but they are passing the ball more. Zay Flowers is an electric weapon, and he's been the guy for this offense. Last week was a little bit of a fluke in my opinion. If you watch the game, the Ravens had no need to throw the ball. They had no need to. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was playing for the Browns, and he played poorly, really bad. The Ravens were up the entire game, and all they needed to do was run the clock out to win that game. In fact, last week, guys, no quarterback threw the ball less than Lamar Jackson. He only had to throw the ball 19 times as they dominated that game script. This week, Bateman and OBJ still dealing with injuries, might be coming back. Regardless, they're not 100%. It's a divisional game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, a plus matchup where wide receivers succeed. Zay's going to bounce back in a big way. He's in my lineups in a 12-man league. All right, the third player that I think is going to absolutely dominate here in week 3 or have a very good game at minimum, Joe Mixon at the Arizona Cardinals. In 2023, the Cardinals give up the 3rd most points per game to fantasy running backs. This offense, let's be honest, in Cincinnati, it's not looked good. It has not looked good. We have to be honest here, okay? But Joe Mixon is the lone bright spot, oddly enough, so far. A guy that wasn't that efficient last year, there was some concern this offseason if he would be on the team. He's been the lone bright spot for this team in 2023. This year, he's had his highest yards per attempt, 4.2, in the last 5 seasons, and his second best rushing success rate at the same time. So, yeah, the offense has been poor, but Joe Mixon has still been a fine fantasy asset, and he's on what has been one of the worst offenses through 4 weeks. Last week, the Bengals played the Titans. The Titans give up the 4th fewest yards per game. They're a very good rushing defense, and Joe Mixon still averaged a healthy 4.8 yards per attempt against that defensive line. Now he gets to face the Arizona Cardinals, who I will give you are playing above expectations, but this is a get-right opportunity for the Bengals at Arizona. And I am locking Joe Mixon into my lineups with the 3rd best matchup he could possibly have this week. All right, the 4th start. Let's go back to another wide receiver. We have a tight end, quarterback, and a couple other players still. We're going to go through 10 guys. But the 4th start here for me this week is Michael Pittman versus the Tennessee Titans. In 2023, the Titans give up the 8th most points to fantasy wide receivers in the first 3 weeks. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I was not a Michael Pittman guy coming into the year. I did not have any Michael Pittman. I was very concerned about this offense, specifically through the air, because I wasn't sure if we could trust Anthony Richardson as a rookie to get the ball to a wide receiver. But in the first 3 weeks, I was wrong at that time, okay? Pittman was starting to look like the steal of the draft. However, week 4, that's kind of what I was expecting, right? In week 4, in a game that went to overtime versus the Rams, Pittman only had 5 targets and finished under 5 PPR points. In those first 3 weeks, Pittman was 6th in targets, averaging 11.3 per game, and he was a wide receiver 10 through 3 weeks in fantasy. I still have my concerns long-term with Anthony Richardson's passing woes. However, this is a fantastic matchup for Michael Pittman and Anthony Richardson to bounce back. I think they will be on the same page. And we saw them wearing their stepbrothers shirts. Maybe this is the week that, we kind of see that connection bounce back. This is the 8th best matchup this year and a top 3 matchup for wide receivers all of 2022. So while I'm still skeptical, I do think Michael Pittman could have one of his best games this week. Okay, the 5th player that I believe is going to dominate this week, Jordan Love at the Las Vegas Raiders. In 2023, the Raiders are a top 10 matchup. They give up the 8th most points to quarterbacks. And Jordan Love is currently the quarterback 3 on the year. Now, let's be honest. Will he finish as a quarterback 3 this year when all is said and done? Probably not, right? But I do believe you can fire him up Monday night in Vegas. In weeks 1 and 2, he had 3 passing touchdowns in each game and averaged over 26 PPR points. In weeks 3 to 4, he didn't play that great when you actually watch the games. I know he had the comeback versus Saints, but he played pretty poorly against the Lions in week 4. However, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 in each game, which kind of lifted his fantasy floor. The good news here in week 5 as we look forward, Christian Watson is back, Aaron Jones is back, and they're probably not going to be on a snap count. Versus the Lions, those 2 players were clearly on a snap count. They didn't play a high percentage of snaps. They didn't get a lot of opportunities, but now Love is going to have his full set of weapons ready to go. Watson, Romeo Doubs, Aaron Jones, Luke Musgrave will be back after the concussion, Jaden Reed. So far in 2023, the Raiders have allowed 19 points to Russell Wilson, 29 points to Josh Allen, 22 points to Kenny Pickett. That's Kenny Pickett's only game this year over 15 fantasy points, and 26 points to Justin Herbert. On average, they are allowing over 24 points per game in a 6-point passing touchdown format. So go ahead and fire up Jordan Love. I think you can start him this week. And if he goes off, I wouldn't be opposed to selling him high. All right, I'm going to get to the next 5 players that I think are going to dominate this week. But before I do, if you guys want to support what we do here on the channel, keep in mind, guys, all the video editing, all the graphic design, admin, anything that we ever put out, live streams, design, anything is all done by myself and Badaki. We put out everything. There's no one else back here helping us. So if you guys want to help us kind of reach our goals of being able to do this full time, then go ahead and use our promo code LAND for 30% off on the Flock Fantasy website. It's a great way to support what we do. And when you use our promo code LAND, sign up to that Mother Flocker tier, you're going to get some incredible perks in return. The fantasy hotline, a direct DM to us where you can ask us for advice. You're going to get my weekly rankings, over 300 players ranked at every position. Great articles from the best industry minds that we have in the space. And you're going to enjoy, I promise you. So go check that out with our promo code LAND. All right, let's get to 5 more players that are going to dominate this week. Number 6, David Montgomery versus the Carolina Panthers. In 2023, the Panthers give up the 4th most points to the running back position. David Montgomery is currently the heart and soul of this Detroit offense. Yes, David Montgomery was a my guy coming into the year. I have a lot of David Montgomery, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but to me, he brings that biting kneecaps mentality that this coaching staff really wants from their team. He's the RB10 on the year, but he's only played 3 games. Okay? Currently averaging 24 touches a game and just under 20 PPR points per game. In negative game scripts, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to play a much bigger part. Negative game scripts meaning the Lions need to come back from behind. However, last week showed us that when the Lions are winning games, they are going to run the ball. The Carolina Panthers is the current matchup this week. How do you think this game script is going to go, guys? From what we've seen from Bryce Young, I'm not ready to write him off yet, but from what we've seen from Bryce Young so far, how do we imagine this game goes? How I imagine it going is the Lions are going to be up early and often, and they're going to be able to run the ball to end this game. That Lions offensive line is going to shine along with David Montgomery. He could easily put up 22 to 25, maybe more rushing attempts in this game. Look, unless Bryce Young, something incredible happens this week, Montgomery is a locked and loaded start into your lineup. Okay, the 7th player that I'm comfortable to start. I can't believe it. We have 2 Jets on the list. Let's fire up Garrett Wilson at the Denver Broncos. The Broncos are the 7th best matchup when you look at points allowed to fantasy wide receivers this year. There's 3 reasons that you should feel very confident starting Garrett this week. Number 1, Zach Wilson has looked better than ever last week versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Completed over 71% of his passes, had a great QBR, and the eye test speaks volumes. If you were able to watch that game, let me know if you disagree in the comments. I have never seen Zach Wilson play like that as a professional athlete, and I have never seen him be comfortable in a game until the Kansas City Chiefs game in week 4. So he looks like he's going to be competent. At least, let's hope. There's signs of hope. Number 2, they are finally hyper-targeting Garrett Wilson. He had 14 targets, versus the Chiefs last week and was barely missed after he burnt his defender to get wide open for a touchdown. It was just barely out of reach. But man, they're going to start to hyper-target him. I expect him to get 8 to 12 targets per game from here on out. And Breece Hall has no limits. We just talked about it. With a healthy Breece Hall, this offense will be better, more scoring opportunities. And the last thing, this matchup is beautiful. Like we said, it's a great matchup. The Broncos are giving up 36.5 PPR points per game, to the wide receiver position. So if you're concerned, I don't think you should. Garrett Wilson should be in every lineup in a standard 12-man league. 8 or 10-man, we'll talk about it, but man, he should have a great week. All right, the 8th player that I think could break out. Okay, this could be the first breakout for this guy. Dalton Kincaid versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are currently the 2nd best matchup for fantasy tight ends. He's the tight end 24 on the year. Kincaid hasn't had a breakout, hasn't looked incredible, hasn't looked super important to the offense just yet. I think this could be the week that we could see him break out. This might be my least confident, but I wanted to add a tight end in there that could be a streaming option for some people. In week 1, the Jags, which is who Dalton Kincaid plays, gave up 7.9 points to Kylen Granson. Come on, Kylen Granson can get 7.9 points? Surely Kincaid can do better than that. In week 2, Travis Kelce did his thing, 12.6 PPR points. In week 3, 9.3 points to Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan didn't have a touchdown all last year, and he gets a touchdown versus the Jags. In week 4, Jonnu Smith, 15.5 PPR points. On the year, they are giving up 13.9 points per game to the position. This is the matchup in London Town to start Dalton Kincaid if you need him. All right, the 9th player, a player that I encouraged you guys to buy low every week so far, week 1, week 2, week 3. We're like, buy this guy. It's going to turn around. Josh Jacobs versus the Green Bay Packers. The Packers give up the 5th most points to fantasy running backs. Hopefully, you bought him like we suggested before his 27-point game breakout last week. But this one is simple, okay? Josh Jacobs' volume is ridiculous. Let's look at his usage, words are hard, in 2023. Snap percentage, he's 5th amongst running backs. Rushing attempt share, he is 4th amongst running backs. Targets, no one at the running back position has more targets so far than Josh Jacobs. And his team target share, he is 3rd amongst running backs. Volume is king, and he is a talented player, and it's finally working out. And the matchup is great. Packers give up almost 26 points per game through 4 weeks to the position. Jacobs is back in his zone, and he should be back locked and loaded into your lineup. And the last guy that I think is going to dominate this week, he hasn't dominated yet so far, Jaylen Waddle versus the Giants. The Giants actually are a middle of the pack defense. They give up the 13th fewest points to the position. And it's been a dry spell if you drafted Jaylen Waddle. He's a wide receiver 56 on the year so far, but that's going to change in week 5. In week 4, Waddle ended the day with 8.6 points. However, he did catch a touchdown. If you watched that game, it was just taken away from him because there was a holding call on the play. He was one play away from almost 17 PPR points. If he had that last week, a lot of people wouldn't be worrying about him right now. Regardless, both the Dolphins and Waddle need a bounce back game. They just got embarrassed by the Bills. You know, there's all this talk about them taking over the division. They get embarrassed. I promise you, they want to put the hammer down on these poor New York Giants. Last year, Jaylen Waddle was a little bit boom and bust. I think some people forget that. But he had over 20 PPR points in 4 games. I'm going to go ahead and call it. This will be his first game over 20 points in 2023. So that is it for today, guys. Hey, can you do me a huge favor and go ahead and absolutely obliterate that like button? The reason we ask you guys to do that is because you are quite literally helping the channel grow when you do so. When you drop a like, you are telling YouTube that you enjoy our content. Maybe others will too, so YouTube pushes us out a little bit more. So go ahead, add a little juice there to the video, to the old algorithm, if you will. Drop a like. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and good luck this week. Go ahead and get a win in week 5. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.